The Hard Rock Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Hard Rock Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us on what was Sonic Temple weekend. And for the most part, I think they dodged the worst of the weather. We'll talk a little bit about that in our open today. And of course, we've got great music, and it was a great week of music. The music of April the 24th will be on topic, and honestly, we could spend probably 3 hours talking about the music of this week. It was probably the strongest week, or very close to, that we've had so far in 2026. We'll be talking about that. And of course, we'll be jumping into the vault, where we'll be giving you a couple of classic albums that you should check out on this week's edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going, yeah. So much good music this week. I think I listened to more new albums this week than any other week, and probably multiple weeks combined, to be honest. There was just no end to the quality. You mentioned Sonic Temple being this weekend, and it's kind of funny on my Facebook feed. I've been getting a lot of these like ChatGPT created festival lineups, and they're the most ridiculous things ever, obviously. But it had me thinking, because I saw the Louder Than Life lineup for later this year, and man, like Thursday's main stage almost feels like something ChatGPT would come up with, because it's so stacked. Like I don't know. I mean, obviously it's subjective. We all have different tastes, but when you look at the Louisville, Kentucky Louder Than Life concert in September, Thursday main stage: Iron Maiden, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Anthrax, Suicidal Tendencies, Metal Church, and The Violent Hour. If you just look at that top four, I mean, that's like a dream concert for people.
Yeah. Honestly, I could buy tickets for just that day, and if I didn't get to see the other days, that would probably be okay.
I mean, you'd be missing out on Limp Bizkit, but, whatever. But yeah, I mean, that is solid. And I hope people feel the same if you're into other subgenres. I hope people feel the same about the other days, where you have My Chemical Romance, A Day to Remember, Taking Back Sunday, Coheed and Cambria. I mentioned Limp Bizkit being on Saturday with Sublime, Bill Murray. I don't know who that is, but I know who Bill Murray is.
Yes.
But, Tom Morello, Cold Chamber, and then Sunday, Tool, Danny Elfman, The Prodigy, Mars Volta. I mean, for my taste, you can't really top Thursday, but all in all, it sounds like something for everybody.
Yeah, a really strong event. It always is. The only issue they sometimes run into is weather. They've had some weather issues in Louisville in September, so always something to keep an eye on. We mentioned weather with Sonic Temple. They did have a little bit of a delay yesterday, but I think by and large, they lucked out pretty much, because I think a lot of the heavier rain in the afternoon stayed to the south of Columbus, so I think overall it wasn't an overly hot weekend.
No.
So really, if you went, I mean, we'd love to hear about it. You can join the Discord and tell us about your experience at Sonic Temple. But it was, I think, overall a pretty good weekend for everybody who did attend. And it was a good chance over the last few weeks to preview the bands that were going to be there. And if you missed out on those, you can check out the Vault on our episodes going back from last week. Every 2 weeks, on back for a while, Mike went through and previewed the bands that were there. So if you're kind of wondering what you might have missed out on, it's kind of a good chance to look back and see who you might need to catch up on, because honestly, there were a few bands that Mike talked about that I kind of had fallen off of, and it was kind of good to get a refresher that not only are they still out there, but they're still touring and they're still producing new music.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you see any like the photos from like a couple different sets? I know Fozzy, Chris Jericho's band, they had a few photos from their set. Looked like they played in front of a huge crowd.
Nice.
But I've talked about it before. I always undersell My Chemical Romance, like they weren't really my thing. But man, some of the pictures I saw from their set just looks absurd.
They clearly fell into a generation that was just after us, I think. Just kind of, people who are probably in their late 20s to late 30s in that window now. Late 20s would be the people who maybe are music geeks they kind of got into the emo stuff. Yeah. Late 30s are probably the people that actually lived it. But yeah, I had a friend of mine who I see from time to time at anime conventions. She's a big My Chemical Romance fan, and she would fall into that late 20s category. But the people who love bands like them love those bands, and they are dedicated to going and seeing them. So, and it seems like those guys are out there playing a bunch of festivals. So if you're a fan of MCR, you're probably going to have a lot of chances to see them over the summer. And like you mentioned, are going to be in Louisville coming up in September.
And I think these kind of festival settings are great because, as we mentioned a week or so ago, you have a lot of concerts being canceled where people just aren't buying tickets. And something like this, it's an established thing. Danny Wimmer presents, like, their stuff always kind of goes off without a hitch, mostly. It's a good opportunity to see them and a crap ton of other bands. I mean, Louder Than Life it makes Sonic Temple look small.
Yeah, which is crazy. But it's been a huge event for many years, and I'm sure, I think you said it almost looks like they have 7 stages if you actually try to break down what they have, and that's just an insane amount of acts that'll be performing. So
yeah, it's wild. The map looked like 6, but when you look at the actual poster, it's broken down as if there would be 7. So I don't know what that looks like, to be honest, but man, there's just so many acts.
The 7th stage is at the pool hall where we saw Sonata Arctica down in Louisville.
Like, one might be at the Sunoco down the street.
Yeah.
They're going to play with Limp Bizkit.
Yes, for sure. The Sunoco in Dayton, Ohio. I feel like that comes up even now every year. Somebody will start that.
Still regret missing that.
Yeah, I feel like Chris, who's joined us in the chat, always is quick to share that anytime that comes up. So we appreciate Chris staying on top of the latest on possibly fictional Limp Bizkit concerts in Dayton, Ohio. But yeah, a lot of good stuff. Any other news items this week to catch your attention before we get into the music? Because there was a ton of music.
Off the top of my head, I think that was about it. There was so much music, I didn't really have a lot of time for news.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the music now. And as I mentioned, this is probably one of the best weeks for music we've had. I'm getting ready to paste the playlist that Mike has put together in both of the chats. Of course, I encourage you every week, but I will especially encourage you this week to go through that playlist, because there is almost certainly going to be something that is really good that we are not going to mention on the podcast because we just didn't get around to it because there was so much good music. But we go through, Mike goes through, puts a playlist together, and then we go through and listen to as many albums as we can get to and try to pick our favorites. But honestly, this is absolutely one of those weeks where we could have each picked 2 or 3 or 4 possibly albums, and we probably wouldn't have been watering down the selections all that much because I felt like it was such a strong week. Definitely curious to get your thoughts on some of your favorites on top of all the other odds and ends we always talk about on the list, and I'll see if there's any that maybe I got to that you didn't get around to because honestly, like I said, this was just an absolutely loaded week of music.
So yeah, kind of getting into the new stuff this week, kind of the major releases. I did not listen to all these because there were so many other smaller acts, I suppose, for lack of a better term, that also released music I wanted to listen to. At the Gates released their 8th studio album, Swedish melodic death metal pioneers. I did not get around to that. I did listen to the new Atreyu, The End Is Not the End. It's their 10th studio album. I think it's fair to call them metalcore legends at this point. Standout tracks on it: Dead, All For You, Break the Glass. All For You is probably the biggest one. I would definitely check that one out. Foo Fighters released their newest album, Your Favorite Toy, 12th studio album from those guys. I mean, American rock megastars.
Yeah, I think that may be one of the more polarizing releases of the week because they have definitely gone for a style, and obviously they're really talented, and this album is not a bad album, but I think depending on listen to the song on the playlist, because if you dig that, I think you're really going to dig the album, and if you're not crazy about that, the album may not be exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't regret listening to it. I think they made some stylistic choices that I wouldn't have done, but they're megastars, and I'm just a random podcaster. Check out Of All People, Your Favorite Toy, Unconditional. It's a solid album, just maybe not. It's not going to be your favorite Foo Fighters album, probably.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
One of the more interesting releases, a group called Nuclear Messiah released Black Flame. This is a really cool project featuring a lot of ex-Megadeth members, among a plethora of other rock stars. You got Chris Poland, Marty Friedman, David Ellison, Glenn Drover, Sebastian Bach, Derek Sherinian, Mick Box, Joe Lynn Turner, William Shatner.
Yeah.
Ronnie
indeed.
Romero, Vinnie Moore, Vinny Appice, Don Airy, Steve DiGiorgio, Thor, Bob Daisley, Arthur Brown, Rick Wakeman, Bumblefoot. I think Chris Adler, former drummer of Megadeth, and Lamb of God is on there as well. Check out the Bandcamp. It's a really interesting release, and I didn't even name everybody. There's just so many performances on this. It's exhaustive.
If you have the Hard Rock Empire bingo card, I think Mike just checked off like half the names of the people that we've mentioned regularly on this podcast, like Bumblefoot and Ronnie Romero, and so great to see Sebastian Bach involved in a project like this for a guy who has a reputation, fair or not, as being maybe not the easiest guy to work with. For him to jump into a project like this is great. I'm happy for him.
It leads me to assume that doing like a one-off with the guy is probably pretty easy, but I watched a video recently kind of talking about the drama of Skid Row, and when you hear the band members talk about it, it's like they may not be the easiest people to work with either, but it's clear that they just have no interest in working with the guy. I guess it kind of came close to happening once, but he flipped out and it just went downhill from there. I don't foresee it happening, sadly, but yeah, I mean, dude can still sing.
Yeah, no question about that.
Sepultura released their newest EP, The Cloud of Unknowing, Brazilian metal legends. A lot going on there. I did check out the Atreyu, the Foo Fighters, and the Nuclear Messiah. Other stuff I enjoyed. The newest one from Allocate, Too Bad to Be Good.
That was good.
Swedish hard rock metal band. One of our picks back from April of 2024 from their previous album. Picking right up where they left off.
Yep.
Just really solid stuff. One that caught my attention was the band Hoka with their album Via Miseria 4, which I think is their debut album, which is kind of odd. It's a band featuring Joel Hoka, former Rasmus, as well as former Rasmus founding member and guitarist and songwriter Paulie Rantasalmi and drummer Jimmy Alslack. Speaking of Joel Hoka, I think he was in a new metal band that did really well in Eurovision. So when you look at this album for being a debut album, some of the tracks have a lot of plays. I can only assume that once you've made it on Eurovision, you have quite the following. They have a really cool cover of the Seal song Kiss from a Rose, which needed to be covered anyway. I mean, It's a great song. And then finally, the band Toxicool, who I talked about back in February of 2024, have released their fourth full-length album, Turbulence. Another band picking up right where they left off. Really solid thing from them as well. And kind of not counting the picks that we made, that was pretty much what I got to this week.
Yeah, a couple more that I got around to. I listened to most of the Gus G release, Steel Burner. I thought that was really solid. Not real familiar with them, but overall I thought that had a really good sound to it. Two Frontiers releases this week I thought were solid. Didn't quite meet up with the ones that some of the ones you've mentioned or the one I ended up picking, but I assume one is Cry. It's Creye with IV Aftermath or For Aftermath, not sure which that is, and Degreed with Curtain Calls. I thought they were both solid, if not, just if you like AOR, you're gonna do well with those. One that was a little more off the beaten path that I listened to some of, but didn't get all the way through it was Dead Reynolds with Yellow Weather Warning. That was kind of up and down. Like the tracks I liked, I really liked. I didn't really like it all. It wasn't 100% for me, but there's some really good stuff on that album. So if you're looking for something different, I think you'll find some things on there as well. On top of some of the stuff that Mike mentioned, it was just a loaded week for music.
Oh, yeah. There were a lot of things that I'd tagged that I would like to have gotten around to. There just is only so much time in the week. You mentioned that one Frontiers band. I would have pronounced it Creye, so I'm glad that you, because I mean, EYEI, Cry,
I don't know. I didn't look it up.
You're probably right.
I didn't pick it, so I didn't look it up. They're from Sweden, so it could be a Swedish word for all I know, and
perhaps
not just a clever pun on cry with I as one of the, which is kind of how I read it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I don't know. So if I ever go back and pick those guys, I'll go back and check it out. But I get solid release from them as well, so definitely worth checking out. It's just, again, playlist is in the chats. I can't implore you enough to go through it because there's some really, really strong stuff on there this week, and I think you will not be disappointed. But alas, we're down to just picking one album each, and that should tell you that the two albums we've chosen are really, really good to have somehow made their way through this just cluster of great music. So we are ready to get to the picks for this week. And Mike, as always, you will kick us off. What do you got for your pick this week?
Yeah, so after all of that and trying to settle on one to actually pick, which was really difficult, I ended up going with a Swiss melodic heavy metal band. They are the Order, and we are talking about their 7th studio album, Empires.
Yeah, I haven't gotten all the way through this one, but this was another one that what I've heard of it is just really, really strong.
Yeah, just blew me away. Band formed in 2004, consists of Gianni Pontillo on vocals, Bruno Spring on guitars, Mauro Cassiero on drums, and Alan Schwarler on bass. The track I picked for the playlist, Warriors, had this really cool drum intro, kind of into the main riff, then a solo, like everything that I would think, okay, this is cool. I'm probably going to have to listen to this whole thing. Cool harmony in the chorus. So obviously I listened to the whole album after that. What I didn't realize until reading about it on Metal Factory's review is that the drum intro is actually the same intro that Iron Maiden uses on the song Where Eagles Dare.
Oh.
They did it as kind of like a nod to them, which, yeah, when you play it back, it most certainly is. I did not realize that at first. The first track on the album, Empires, might be my favorite track on the album. It's got this really cool descending guitar riff through the verses, and like Warriors, a big chorus and some ridiculous solos. Sometimes I get hints of Sammy Hagar or David Coverdale from Gianni's vocals. Not all the time, but every now and then. The song Wherever I Go sounds like it could be a Van Hagar song, like just literally does. Overall, the whole album's fantastic, and another band that I feel kind of bad that I wasn't familiar with until now. Standout tracks on the album include Thieves in the Night, Wherever I Go, of Martyrs and Tyrants, The Boneheads' Back, Promises and Illusions, and the track that I picked to listen to, the title track, Empires.
Check these guys out. This is The Order with Empires. This is the title track and the opening track to this album, and my YouTube Music just decided to refresh, so we'll get that song pulled up here in just a second. I just have to re-cue it up once again, which I can do very quickly. And now that'll be close enough. We'll just start right there. This is the opening track, the title track, Empires. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Human hands, the cycle of life, cycle of death, empires rise and take the ground, one by one, beneath the sun, the mighty will tumble, all your empires will fall and fade away, leaving only memories, all your empires will fall.
Yeah, there's definitely a different mix to his vocal sound. It's hard to really peg it as one thing, but you do hear elements of a couple of different guys in there. But, I mean, overall, this is just, it's got great vocals. It's got great music. It's just really strong. I mean, in a week where we had a ton of strong stuff, this really did stand out.
Yeah, it really did. And again, it's another situation where it's like, why didn't someone tell me this music was being made by people? Why am I just now discovering it? These guys have been around for 22 years, but, it is what it is.
Yeah, better late than never, as they say. So always great to be able to finally discover bands that have been flying under the radar for whatever reason. So we bring them to you on this podcast. So check out The Order. It is definitely one of the stronger releases of 2026 so far. I had a hard time picking just one, honestly, this week. I thought there was so much good stuff. In the end, I decided to go with a Norwegian band founded in 2020. This is Kaasin with The Underworld. Apologies in advance for my poor Norwegian, because we're going to run through some band names and even the band name itself, and hopefully I've come close on all of these. This is their second full-length album after 2021's Fired Up. The band is made up of Jan Thore Grefstad on vocals, Johenning Kaasin on guitar, Ståle Kaasin on bass, Erling Henanger on keyboards, and Per Morten Bergseth on drums. Kaasin was founded in 2020 by the guitarist. And of course, he came from the band Come Taste the Band, which is an interesting name. Kaasin had been really built a name for himself, doing some collaborations with people like Glenn Hughes, of course, of Deep Purple, and Joe Lynn Turner of Everybody, but listed here from Rainbow. this album I thought was a really great mix of hard rock and AOR, and the vocals really kind of carry it to that next level. A review from the headbangingmoose.com said the foundation of Kaasin was laid with a clear ambition to create contemporary hard rock with a classic spirit and a strong sense of identity, and both Fired Up and the Underworld bring forward exactly that, the sound and feeling for our absolute delight. This was a week where there was a lot of really good AOR stuff, so to jump out and kind of separate yourself from two really strong Frontiers releases and other releases from Pride and Joy, who had a really strong week. Really, I thought that these guys, the musicianship, the vocals, the songs, were all maybe a half step to a step above all the other AOR stuff this week. And that's why I really recommend picking this up. Excited to see this band continue to grow and maybe even tour outside of Europe at some point. It would be really cool to see these guys, but really, really enjoyed this. Standout tracks include Two Hearts, Over the Mountain, The Real World, and the track we're going to play on the playlist is We Speed at Night. Here is Kaasin with their new album, The Underworld. This is the third track off of that album, We Speed at Night. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Take the time, set your mind. We will be there by tonight. Passing the canyon, see lightning in the sky. We'll do this right. We'll speed at night. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just overall, I thought it was a really balanced album. Like I said, vocals were really good. You heard a little bit of the him stretching the vocals there, but also I thought the music was really enjoyable as well. Really strong release from these guys. Mike, your thoughts?
Man, there's a lot to unpack here. So you mentioned the guitarist was previously in the band Come Taste the Band.
Yes.
I'm curious if that was a Deep Purple tribute band.
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Because Come Taste the Band was the name of their 1975 album, which was the first album that didn't have David Coverdale on it. Or not David Coverdale, Richie Blackmore.
Yeah.
It still had Coverdale and Glenn Hughes in the band at that point in time.
Okay.
So there's definitely a connection there. Also kind of interesting, the song you picked, We Speed at Night. There's a Dio song, I Speed at Night. So there's kind of that too. So everything's just kind of,
The
mixing
influence is
around. Yeah.
pretty clear.
It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I thought these guys were really outstanding and excited to continue to see them develop as they go forward. So good stuff from Kaasin. Definitely worth checking out this week and what was a very strong week of music. And again, one final plug for the playlist. There's a lot of great stuff on there this week. You should definitely check it out. If you are watching on Twitch, we are going to take a quick 90-second ad break. Twitch makes us run ads a couple times an hour. If you are subscribed, which you can do for free with your Prime, or you can just subscribe if you'd like to support our podcast, you can do so and you won't get the ads. If you're on YouTube, there will not be any ads. You'll hear us talk. And if you are getting ads, if you don't mind, please stay through the ads. It'll help us a lot if you can stay through them. Only 90 seconds. And we'll be back on the other side to talk about the vault. You won't miss a thing. We'll be back in about 90 seconds to get to the vault. A couple of really great classic albums to check out this week. So we are waiting for the ads to start now on Twitch, and they are underway. What a week this was. Honestly, there was just too much good music this week, and it's where we get a little frustrated because obviously next week we're going to talk the music of May the 1st, and May is one of those 5 Friday months, so I'm curious to see whether next month we'll be able to live up to what was just a phenomenal end to April.
Yeah, and we talk about Frontiers all the time, but Pride and Joy had a huge week.
They did.
The Allocate album, what I heard from the Live Alien album, a band who I've not really listened much to, I thought that was really good. I know they had more on here that I'm just not scrolling down and seeing. Oh, the Kaasin album, obviously. But yeah, I mean, they're there. We had some Inside Out albums too. I feel like there are more and more labels that are kind of slotting into that sweet spot for our music taste.
Yeah, and it's great to see that there's more than just Frontiers out there. Of course, we enjoy the stuff they put out, but Pride and Joy has really had a strong run of stuff. And this week, I thought they really brought their absolute best. And I don't want to downplay that Allocate album because on any other given week, I absolutely would have picked them. I thought that was a really, really good album. Definitely enjoy those guys' work, and you should go pick that album up. Too Bad to Be Good is the name of that album, so I want to give that a shout out. I know you did earlier, but absolutely. Again, there was half a dozen easily could have been picked with really no thought at all on our part, and we'll hope that next week when we rejoin you next Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, we'll have another strong week. It'll be the music of May the 1st coming up next week, so we hope you will join us for that. A couple other notes. Now that we've gotten through our tennis season, expect to see our Japanese music podcast soon. Soon, probably after Memorial Day, I would guess. We'll get it all figured out, and that will be coming up. So make sure you join the Discord to find out when that is. Also, we're going to see some more other streams from us. We would like to do maybe one gaming stream a week or every other week with our members of the Hard Rock Empire, the Nerdcast Empire, on this channel so that we can have some people here for more than just podcast content. So stay tuned. That stuff's coming up soon, so we're looking forward to some new programming as we get into the summertime. But now it's time to get into the vault, where Mike and I will talk about a couple of classic albums that you should check out. And Mike is on to his continued push through the 70s at the moment. He went all the way back to 1969, looking for some albums that either were maybe debut albums for bands or just momentous albums for bands, or maybe ones that Mike just wanted to catch up on at some point. And I believe we're up to 1975 this week. I almost said this year.
We are.
And again, when we talked about these years when I went through them, we're getting into kind of that era where there were just so many big albums that came out every year. So I'm definitely curious to hear about what you have chosen for 1975.
Yeah, so, every week when I do this, I go through the Wikipedia entry for the year in music and just see what all's been released and narrow it down to what I think I might enjoy. I try to steer away from things I've listened to just for the sake of new music acquisition.
Sure.
As far as 1975 goes, we had some pretty big debuts. AC/DC released High Voltage. According to Wikipedia, only in Australia and New Zealand. I don't know if it came out later over here in the West. Alice Cooper released his debut solo album, Welcome to My Nightmare.
Nice.
There's one more debut, but I will not mention it yet because it's the one I picked. Other big albums in 1975, we got Rush with both Fly By Night and Caress of Steel.
Jeez.
It's crazy to think you could somehow write Caress of Steel in under a year, but they did it. Led Zeppelin, Physical Graffiti, Blue Oyster Cult, On Your Feet or On Your Knees, Yes, Yesterdays. Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic. Nazareth, Hair of the Dog, which I didn't mention at the time, but the lead singer of the band that I picked this week, he's actually the new lead singer of Nazareth.
Oh, okay.
Who knew? He's still going to continue with the Order, but yeah, I read that as well, so that's pretty cool.
Oh.
And then one that I have listened to, one of my favorite albums of all time, Queen's A Night at the Opera, came out in 75.
Which was the one I chose when we went through the previous time.
Understandably, it's tremendous.
Yeah, it's maybe one of my all-time favorite albums, even to this day.
So anyway, going into my pick, to kind of set the stage, April 7th, 1975, Ritchie Blackmore plays his last live show with Deep Purple, at least until returning in 1984, but for the time being, he is out the door. He planned to write a solo album along with Elf's Ronnie James Dio on vocals. They used other members of the band Elf as studio musicians, but ultimately fired them during rehearsals for the tour, replacing the band with Jimmy Bain on bass, Cozy Powell on drums, and Tom Carey on keyboards. We are talking about today the 1975 debut of the band Rainbow. That album is simply called Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Yeah,
I feel like this is one I'm going to have to go back and listen to because obviously one of the tracks I think probably everybody that's listening to this podcast probably is very familiar with, but there's a good chance that a lot of those people are also familiar with this whole album because obviously it was pretty groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I didn't really follow Rainbow's history up until this point. Like I know more of what Dio did after the fact and honestly what Rainbow did after the fact because a lot of their major hits took place after Dio left. But anyway, the recording lineup of the band never actually performed live, the members of Elf along with Blackmore. So the photos that were included with the album are of Blackmore while he was still in Deep Purple and just pictures of Elf performing live. Like it wasn't actually the band. I kind of alluded to this. One thing I didn't realize is that Rainbow in its Dio years wasn't some runaway success. It wasn't until his last album with them that they really got critical acclaim. And of course, their most commercially successful tracks would be after Dio, with Graham Bonnet singing on 1979's Down to Earth with the hit Since You've Been Gone, and Joe Lynn Turner singing on 1982's Straight Between the Eyes with the hit Stone Cold, and 83's Bent Out of Shape with the hit Street of Dreams. At that point, they were definitely 80s mainstream rock sounding band. Wrote some hits, but probably not what Ritchie Blackmore was envisioning when he first created the band. As for Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, this is a really interesting album. You have the one really noteworthy song, Man on the Silver Mountain. To me, this feels like a precursor to the sound that Dio would ultimately pursue in his solo career. The album features 2 cover songs, Black Sheep of the Family, originally done by the British prog rock band Quatermass, and Still I'm Sad, an instrumental Yardbird song. Both are really cool. A song I wasn't familiar with, but actually has the most plays on YouTube Music, is The Temple of the King. This song really has that folksy thing going on and highlights Blackmore's writing and Dio's vocal delivery. After Man on the Silver Mountain, this song to me feels like what someone would want a Blackmore Dio project to sound like. The oddball song to me is If You Don't Like Rock and Roll. It's such an old school rock tune, complete with like the choppy piano, like the same like chords over and over again. But even with Dio singing, it almost sounds threatening, as the chorus lyrics say, "If you don't like rock and roll, then it's too late now." What does that mean? It's not too late. This is 1975. There's still plenty of time to like rock and roll, or I don't know what the repercussions for not liking it are, but that was the chorus, which, again, it feels a little out of place compared to Man on the Silver Mountain and some of the other slower tracks, but it's there. This album probably isn't on people's lists of favorite Rainbow albums or favorite albums Dio or Blackmore worked on. But for 1975, I think it's overall a pretty cool album. Standout tracks include, obviously, Man on the Silver Mountain, Black Sheep of the Family, The Temple of the King, 16th Century Greensleeves, and Still I'm Sad.
Yeah, obviously I need to go back and listen to this. Reading the Wikipedia page on Man of the Silver Mountain, I was like, Brad Sanders of AV Club wrote that although the song's lyrics are essentially meaningless, the way Dio sings them sounds awesome.
He had that ability.
Yeah, he was could sing the phone book and probably make you care about it. It says, after Dio's death, Rob Halford performed a cover of the song and said it, quote, captures the things I personally love in metal tracks. Yeah. It's a metal, if you need to show somebody what is a metal song, you could play that song for them and it would describe it pretty well.
And, you can say that there's not meaning, but to me, it's kind of like this statement of like, I'm inevitable. I'm a wheel, I can roll, I can feel. You can't stop me turning. I'm the sun, I can move, I can run, but you'll never stop me burning. It's basically defiance. It's whatever you do, you're not going to stop me. I'm just going to keep going forward, sung in a way and lyrically as only Dio could do, I suppose. But great song.
Yeah, definitely. And is interesting to see both him and Rainbow kind of getting their start here as far as what would become just obviously Rainbow having a bunch of hits after Dio, and obviously Dio becoming, if you think of Man on the Silver Mountain, you think of Dio and you think of all the stuff that Dio would go on to do. Like, it feels like that song slides right into his biggest hits and his hits with Heaven and Hell in a very seamless way almost.
Well, you kind of feel like Holy Diver is like the spiritual successor to Man on the Silver Mountain.
Yeah.
Like it's very kind of mid-tempo, not a speed metal tune by any means, but big chorus. And yeah, like, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I kind of prefer Dio's Black Sabbath over Ozzy's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
not to say that obviously Ozzy's had great songs, because they did. I mean, there were great songs from Ozzy. But yeah, as far as Ronnie James Dio's he's my guy. Like,
as a singer, I prefer him.
Yeah, and that's no slight to anybody else. It's just the way it is. So, it's a good album choice. Definitely worth checking that one out from 1975. I am continuing through my run of Journey albums. Of course, as I mentioned, the first 3 were very much prog albums. Very interesting to go through. We saw them turn the corner a little bit 2 weeks ago as Steve Perry joined the band. They're going to continue their move in that direction this week with the 1979 release of Evolution. We'll show you again the tier list to start off with. This is where we're at now. Of course, the previous release, the one I talked about 2 weeks ago, made it into the great hits, but not quite the best. We'll get back to this tier list in a little bit. The first three albums all listed in the excellent musicianship, but probably limited re-listens. This was released in March of 1979 by Columbia Records. It is the band's first album to feature drummer Steve Smith, who would be with them through all the big hits that they wrote in the late 70s and early 80s. At the time, it was the band's most successful album, reaching number 20 on the Billboard 200 chart and sold 3 million copies in the U.S. They retained Roy Thomas Baker as producer, of course, best known for his work with Queen, but Ainsley Dunbar was replaced with Smith, who was formerly of Ronnie Montrose's band. The rest of the band, still the same. Steve Perry on lead vocals, Greg Rowley on backing, and co-lead vocals are actually sort of his own lead vocals on one song. Neil Schon on lead guitar, Ross Valerie on bass guitar, and Steve Smith on drums. This features their first top 20 hit, Lovin' Touchin' Squeezin', which is inspired by the classic Sam Cooke top 20 hit, Nothing Can Change This Love, and reached number 16 in the U.S. Just the Same Way was reached number 58 on the Billboard Hot 100, featured Greg Rowley as the lead vocalist, with Perry singing kind of co-vocals. Looking at the reviews of the album, solid. All Music really liked it. Gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. The Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal gave it 7 out of 10, and the Rolling Stone Album Guide 2 out of 5. They weren't a real big fan of the last album either. Record World said the single Too Late takes the rock ballad to new limits with a call and response hook line and Neil Schon's dashing guitar break. The magazine called Just the Same Way a hard but slick rocker. The Globe and Mail, less impressed, concluded that all the songs here could well have originated the same session as the numbers on the previous album and suggests stagnation. All Music, again, really liked this. The review from them said Journey has never sounded stronger or more determined, and with Steve Perry's tenor pipes now clearly driving the band's engine and guitarist Neil Schon beginning to relish his guitar hero persona, Journey could seemingly do no wrong. Evolution quickly became the band's biggest selling album, and Perry and company soon embarked on yet another mammoth tour, which set many an attendance record and set the stage for an even greater triumph with 1980's Departure, which we'll talk about in 2 weeks. This was another album that had songs that were typically played back-to-back on radio stations. Now, if you heard some stations that typically cut off the second song, you wouldn't get it, but a lot of classic rock stations would run Lovin' Touchin' Squeezin' and City of the Angels back-to-back. They go together perfectly, and to be honest with you, City of the Angels, in my opinion, is the stronger track. I think the best track is Just the Same Way, track number 8, which features Greg Rowley in his primary lead sing role, with Steve Perry backing him up. But you can definitely tell that Rowley's vocals have, or at the very least, were produced differently here than those first 3 albums where he was the primary lead singer. It makes you wonder at this point if they were considering maybe running Rowley for a few tracks for every album to kind of mix it up with Perry, kind of similar to what Chicago did in their early days. Obviously, that's not what happened, as we all know. Perry pretty much took the lead role and ran with it. I think this album, while less progressive than the first 3, this is probably the closest thing you're going to get to having Perry sing on those first 3 albums. The songs are a little less hit-ish, if you will. They're a little less polished. It's a solid album, probably not one I'd go back to regularly. It's the first of 3 straight albums that have a hit or two on there, but really, you're not going to see them really break through with just a massive album until you get to Escape and Frontiers, which will be coming up in the 80s, and that's why on my tier list, I have slotted it into the 3rd slot, which is probably we'll listen to the hits on Greatest Hits only. Probably not an album I'm going to revisit a ton. It was fine. It was cool to hear some new songs that I wasn't familiar with, but as far as putting this thing on and listening to it nonstop, probably not going to happen. Standout tracks include Too Late, Lovin' Touchin' Squeezin', City of the Angels, Just the Same Way, and Daydream. And in 2 weeks, we will get to 1980's Departure, as I mentioned. Interesting time here for Journey. You can tell they're settling in with Steve Perry being the front man, but, didn't really have a ton of hits off of it, even though the album itself seemed to do pretty well. It's kind of an interesting spot as they kind of work their way up to what will be some really mega hits when we get into the 80s.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to see Roley having co-lead on one of the songs. I just wonder if his diminished role over the years is what ultimately will lead to his departure in a couple albums. I don't know, but it makes you wonder. And it's also wild that music critics were so insane about albums sounding similar.
Yeah.
From one album to the next. I can understand if 4 albums later they're doing the same thing over and over again, maybe being a little intense about it. But this is a band who had a sound and then just bailed on it. Mm-hmm. 2 albums of a similar sound doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me.
Well, and the other thing we mentioned, and you mentioned it earlier about Rush having 2 albums in 1975, these bands at the very least were releasing 1 album per year. So it's kind of hard when you release an album, say in 1978, you're going to tour on that album for the next 6 to 8 months, and you're going to get in the studio and write the next album. Odds are good that your sound's going to sound pretty similar because you've just been playing 8 months worth of the album you just recorded. How in the world are you going to have your sound just radically evolve in a short stretch in the studio?
Well, and there's no guarantee that they didn't have 3 or 4 of the Evolution songs kind of put together in principle during the Infinity recording session.
Yeah, so it very easily could have been some of these tracks that just got left off because, again, we're talking about albums, so you couldn't just have 14 or 15 tracks. If you had a couple you liked, but it's like, well, we don't have room on the album. Sorry, you'll have to
maybe some aren't ready yet. Like, we got to a certain point. We need the album done. These are going to have to be pushed aside, and we'll finish them at a later date, which could just be 8 months or 12 months from now.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. It's as someone who likes Journey, this has been a fun exercise. Just hearing a bunch of tracks I wasn't really familiar with. Definitely curious to see how things turn as we head into the 80s coming up in 2 weeks and see how the band kind of continues to evolve. And like Mike said, you're going to start seeing some more conflict, obviously, anytime these bands hit it big, and especially when they were a band that was so different to start with, there's inevitably going to be friction, and I think that's where you're going to see some members start bailing out on them. So we'll talk more about that coming up in a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, that is going to bring to an end another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to join us at the Discord. That's where you're going to hear about anything and everything we've got going on here at the Hard Rock Empire. Please join us there. A reminder, we'll be back with you next Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, for another edition of the Hard Rock Empire. May 1st, we'll be talking the music of May 1st coming up next Sunday night. Big thanks to Mike, as always, for his hard work on the podcast. Big thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of the podcast. And a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you are listening to this podcast. That's all for tonight. We'll come back at you next week, next Sunday night, for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. And until then, don't forget to join the Empire. Hard Rock Empire.